Hello and welcome back to another RiftGuides WildRift video. Today we're going to take a look at Chronix on EZREAL. Former rank 1 challenger on the server, always legend, always at the top of the leaderboard, former pro, everything you want to have from an AD carry, and he provided us with an EZREAL gameplay. But before we go into that gameplay and talk about that build, let's talk about our question of the day. What do you think about EZREAL? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget guys, the giveaway on Twitter is still ongoing for another 3 days. Up until the 6th where the winners are called, you have time to participate. So make sure to join up on Twitter, do all the things you have to do, and then you have a chance of winning a skin. Do so and do so fast. Follow everything in the description below, and now let's move over to the build. For EZREAL we want to start with a Monomune for maximum damage and scaling. After this we want Sheen. But now we don't want to complete Trinity Force yet. It doesn't grant us as much damage as going for Cyrilda's Grudge. Now with Cyrilda's Grudge under our belt, we want to complete Trinity Force. Now we have all the damage sources we want. After this, we want to go for the new item, a Rift Maker, to make sure we get everything we want, because poking is something our champion loves to do. After this, we want Blade of the Rune King, and then we have the Sustain already completed. Also having a lot of bonus damage on enemy champions. For boots, I recommend either defensive boots or Gluttonous Grease, which are really broken on your champion. And for your enchantment, Stasis obviously. For your runes, you want Kraken Slayer, Vampirism, Bone Plating, and Nimbus Cloak. If you feel like it, you can also go Mana Flow. And now, let's take a look at the gameplay. And we are back with a video from Chronix. In this game, he's showcasing his EZREAL and what a powerful pick EZREAL can be. A lot of people believe that EZREAL during the laning phase is rather weak, but that's not true at all. His laning phase is rather on the stronger end, and the reason is rather simple. He has an attack speed or an attack speed steroid on his passive. Not only to mention, he can use Kraken really well with an auto attack into first ability into auto attack, and if that was only it, it's quite a lot of damage if you combine everything into short traits. Also being able to hit your second ability and then your third ability becomes like auto-aimed, and it will always hit even through a minion wave, you have a lot of bonus damage. But the laning phase against Caitlyn and Lulu is going to be difficult. It will be mostly dependent on his Lux to be playing well, and the Lux starts with the first ability already dealing damage to the enemy. Chronix is losing his Bone Plating through Caitlyn and just getting poked by her. The good thing is Caitlyn used her first ability to push the wave, and therefore everything will be okay, but he's taking a lot of damage for no reason so far. Laning phase has not been so well for him so far. But given the fact that he's with a Lux, it's redeemable, because all that needs to happen is Lux hitting a bind, and then the enemy will just go sky. But for EZREAL in general, if you cannot be super aggressive early on, it's not the biggest of problems because you scale relatively well and are able to punish the enemy. His Lux is doing a lot of weird things, using Summoner Heal for whatever reason, and we don't really understand, but it doesn't matter, because you see, Chronix is staying out of danger because there's no reason for him to walk up. They cannot win trades unless Lux hits her binding or spells. If they walk close, however, they will just be ran down by the Caitlyn and the Lulu. So there's no reason for them to get close, so they just play it slow and he's scaling up. However, if the binding is connecting with the Nunu gank as well in the flash, then it will net into a safe kill. Now, unfortunately, if we didn't use our summoner spells earlier for no reason, things would be rather nice, but it is what it is, you can't really change too much, and Chronix should now hover towards the riverside and just being able to back up. Even though he doesn't want to fully commit, he just wants to be able to back his teammates up just in case something happens. Now, he doesn't want to associate with this at all because he needs to recall. The wave is already on the tower and he needs to go back to lane as fast as possible. He needs to spend his gold and then get back to lane. He has a decent spike with a Caulfield's Hammer and a Tear, but obviously it's not what he wants to have. Notice that he is not spamming his first ability while walking back to lane, which he should be doing because he gets tier stacks faster. It's a slight mistake that he usually does because I know it, but sometimes he forgets about it, which is completely normal. Now, the same thing happens again. They can't really trade anything, they have to poke. And Chronix ideally wants to just push the wave and go for another reset for his Monomune. He will not have enough gold, however. He will have enough gold on the next wave, which is completely fine, and then he is scaling up really nicely. Ideally though, he gets the mana immune plus Sheen reset, because then he has agency during the laning phase because he has way more poking potential and scaling potential. And here you saw the combination with his second ability and his third ability. Again, if Lux now happens to hit a binding, things get really messy for the Caitlyn Lulu lane. Even though they are in a sense of potency stronger, if they get tagged by the binding, they will die. So now Chronix just has to play it around those rules and just continuously poke them and then finally or eventually get the kill. You see, binding hits, enemy dies, he's tanking for the Akali should go in for the kill. This should be free, but for some reason the Akali just absolutely misplays and the Lux dies as well. Huh? I don't... I have no idea why they just did this. Yone could potentially kill him, apparently has no ultimate available. I think Chronix didn't know that and expected him to ult. But yeah, he needs to push this wave and Nuno needs to help him by doing so. It doesn't matter who gets the CS, the wave just needs to go on the tower. That's more than good enough. Now he has the mana immune and the Sheen spike we talked about earlier. Now he has the damage to bully people constantly. This is one of the biggest spikes for Ezreal possible, and once you have this, you will have an easier time playing the game. For boots, etc., you want the Gluttonous Greaves because of the sustain, because he deals so much magical and physical damage. And you don't want to complete Triforce early on, it just nets you less damage, you want Cyril this. And you see how much damage he's dealing with one first ability? It's quite a lot. And now, it's yet again playing it patient. He just wants to poke them out, maybe his Lux hits a binding, and then everything will be over. We saw the Yone rotating up, so the Yone will be in this upper area, so going for an all-in now is rather risky. And if they would go for it, they might die. He's going for chip damage because, don't forget, on Ezreal, it's kind of a specific thing. You can spam your ultimate all the time because every single time you hit your first ability, you will cooldown reduction on your ultimate whatsoever. So it doesn't matter. You just use it to poke, use it to punish people, and then set up plays around it. I'm not the happiest about Nuno's choice to go for a dragon because the dragon doesn't really help too much. Because he has a Jax inside lane. Getting the Jax ahead makes the life so much better for his team. The clumped up, he dies here. Okay, so the enemy team has multiple assassins and obviously fights around dragons get really messy because of the sheer amount of people around there, and then the enemy has an easy time, depending on how many assassins they have, to reach the backline, especially with things like Zed and Yone. They will always be able to reach you, and obviously you're human, you can't look at all the variables at the same time because you can't look top left and top right at the same time. Even with the peripheral vision, it doesn't really work. And if you get tagged once, you instantly die. However, for the Zed, he has to counterplay with the exhaust, which is completely fine, but then the Yone appeared and he couldn't react fast enough, so he gets killed. Now the Caitlyn is unbelievably fed for no reason while having a Lulu behind him. But still, you see how much damage he dealt to her? That is the power of an Ezreal. He basically scales with how good you are, similar to most other AD carries, but he's even more powerful in that regard. The Lux didn't trigger her third ability fast enough, so Chronix had to invest his flash to get the kill on Caitlyn. One might argue, since there's no objective in the game, it's completely fine in doing so because he won't need it anyway, but still losing your flash for something like this is never a nice thing to happen. About this ultimate, I think it would have been better if you waited a tiny bit and sniped towards the enemy base to remove Caitlyn's home guard. Then Caitlyn would be slower in coming back, because he couldn't have known that this play in bot lane would happen in the way it happened, but he could have denied Caitlyn's ability to come back to lane faster. That is something that's really annoying. If you get hit by a skill shot from base and your home guards get removed, you're so slow. It's so annoying. I hate it when it happens. Again, for whatever reason, the Lulu is ulting. I think she wants to give moral support. And the Caitlyn is just trying to space forward, killing the Lux. But that's something that doesn't really work like that. Think about this, okay. Lux is a cooldown based champion. No damage without cooldowns. So once she uses her cooldowns, why should you be hitting her when there's an Ezreal next to her? If you hit the Ezreal next to her, the Lux can't really do anything but auto-attack back, but if you're already at the 7th or 8th minute into the game, those auto-attacks will not really be that powerful. with that in mind, if she attacked the EZREAL only, things might have looked different from the get-go. And obviously using your movement spells for the upcoming second rotation of luck skills will just get you killed if you don't have them available. But here we saw that he is going for the Zerilda after the Sheen because he realizes that it's less damage to complete the Triforce because it's such an expensive item, and the Zerilda just adds so much more utility and just overall power to how he's playing the game. Also, notice how he's not putting himself at risk and trying to go for gold. Like if for example the Gromp was up, he would go for the Gromp, and he's just trying to stay at range and poking people out and only going in if he can go for the kill. Like his role needs to scale, his role needs time, and once he has reached a critical mass, he will start carrying easily. So there's not necessarily any reason for him to participate into like suicidal activities in the game, because it doesn't help him. Against that enemy team, Plated Steel Caps will probably provide him with more value, because if anyone ever reaches him, it will reduce more damage. But you can also make the argument, just don't get hit forehead, you're EZREAL, just need some sustain. And then you'll only get hit by like collateral damage from other spells. But now it's going to be a very fun time for the EZREAL to deal damage, but he has to be very careful before he shifts in, because the moment he makes a mistake, the enemy team can still easily reach him, so you will see him be very hesitant with just overall his arcane shift. Any mistake is immediate death for him, so he needs to be very conservative with that spell. For this, it's mostly about understanding the cooldowns of the enemy team. The Yone still having his third ability available and such will be very dangerous for him, but here he can just shift forward because whatever happens to him, number 1 there's a Lux behind him, number 2 he has Flash, number 3 he has Exhaust. There's not enough enemies on his screen to get him killed. So even if you might believe you're at a slight disadvantage, you can use your summoner spells and overall people around you as an advantage. The more people get involved and the more complex the cooldowns get, the more problematic will it become to decide in such situations. I am not very happy with overall the team's positioning here, because it's the second dragon for his team, which could have been played for if they really wanted to, if they got position, but they spent so much time for mid lane tier 1 that it wasn't an option. Lux is wasting her flash and heal to save a teammate who is not even in danger, and then madness just unfolds. And now they're just in a situation where they can't really do anything, and he is forced to flash away and will probably still... Ooh, he didn't die. But this dragon fight, just due to the positioning of the things and Jax doing Herald, just a big no. You just ignore it. Because now think about this. They just got 1 dragon, okay? 1 dragon is useless. 2 dragons are also not the best, but it allows you to go for the 3rd dragon win condition because it's a lot of stats. And if you reach that point and you are a carry, you'll truly love it. But in this instance, going for the 2nd dragon in such a disadvantageous positioning, you will more likely just lose. And just dying to the enemy team is more severe or more grave towards your own chances of winning than losing the dragon itself. Because that is happening all the time. People go for dragons and they all die, and then they say dragons are broken. No, they are not broken, you are just dying to the enemy team, giving them thousands and thousands and thousands upon gold. That the enemy team is just winning. It's not the dragons, it's you running it down. Accept it. Now, the typical AD carry thing is happening as per usual, just getting gold on the side lanes and scaling up. Here's another big item spike and nothing is happening. For his team, it's kind of troublesome because his Jax is so weak and still needs time to scale before he becomes a menace in the side lane, that the typical thing just unfolds. It's the ARAM. Running at people mid lane, hoping to get a catch with a Nunu, and then just running them down with spells. The only thing he has to be careful of is the enemy assassins, because yeah, you see, the Yone comes from nowhere and just blasts him. He survives though. But this is the problem when the fights happen that way. But if you are running away from enemies, EZREAL becomes really powerful in the sense of just kiting backwards. He is able to just hit anyone running after him with spells over spells over spells, and they'll get killed. But for some reason his teammates are enjoying themselves quite a lot in terms of dying. There's nothing you could have changed there, because they just chose to die. It was the enemy's decision. But it doesn't matter so far because he's still very much in the game. He is still very powerful, he is well farmed, he has a lot of gold that he can still carry. So even that he loses this tower doesn't really matter too much, but if the enemy does something like this, it's just utter suicide. Like, if the enemy is better, he will maybe or most likely die for this, but they play it so unbelievably bad that he's just getting away with it for absolutely free. So when this is something that most Lulu players do wrong, they use their second ability for their allies, when just sheeping or polymorphing the enemy reduces more damage than the bonus attack speed on your carry grants your carry. Because if the enemy can't attack you, you don't take any damage and the enemy just dies. Whatever they do, and it's just a game of numbers. And because they ran it down, they basically mind controlled their teammates to also run it down because they're all completely desynced. Also with the Lux, Baron is so much easier than with anything else. And if the enemy goes close, they threaten to die, because the enemy is going for Lux again. Lux is completely useless once cooldowns are down, and she can just run away, and even being a damage sponge is very powerful. And he just needs to play it slow. Every spell thrown at the enemy, going for the isolated people, going in with the exhaust, just spacing forward and backward all the time, not giving the enemy any chance of fully committing onto him. So what he's doing, he's weaving in and out of the fight, making the enemy trouble, like absolutely confused in what they should be doing, because they can't reach him while the enemy is also doing Nasher. So they are torn between two decisions. Do I stop the Nunu from doing Nasher, or do I kill the Ezreal? But I can't reach the Ezreal, but if I go towards the Nunu, the Ezreal comes back. And Chronix knows this, so he goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and slowly chokes out the enemy until he can go in for the kill. From a camera point of view, you see how he's panning the camera more top right to see where the enemy assassins are, so he can move more freely, because he just needs to understand what is coming in his direction so he can be more aggressive. He's perfectly dancing on knife's edge to deal the most damage while being super safe. Enemy going in, he's avoiding it, and he's just choking them out slowly. His Lux is doing random things again for no reason, and we just have no idea what the purpose is. But yeah, as you see, he's just sieging the enemy team with his Ezreal, constantly poking them out and slowly getting them killed. It's not about killing them instantly, it's about getting the greater goal of this tower and then enjoying his time once he has done so. With this done, he wants to get the next objective and the jungle linked to that objective. Whenever you play this game and you siege an enemy inhibitor or tier 2 tower and the enemy isn't in a position to get back into the jungle, take their jungle. Take everything they have and make it your own, because if they can't take it, you'll get so much more free gold compared to them, because you also have your own jungle to farm afterwards. Now with the super minions running in on the other side of the map, them contesting the dragon would end up in them losing so much because they're getting their base damaged. It's just too risky. And if they happen to die here for the second dragon, then the game will be lost again. It's just a second dragon. They still have a chance at winning, and if they all die here, they just lose every chance of winning. There's just no point for the enemy team to contest this dragon. They should rather go for a trap or anything along those lines to maybe have a chance at winning. Now you see things get a little bit troublesome here because Chronix is getting really ahead of himself. He doesn't have access to the Stasis enchant because he went for Protobelt, because he wants to go for more successive plays, and in doing so, or not having so, he's just in a position where he can't really overextend that much. So this was a pure ego play which could let his team lose this game, or rather let the enemy team allow to come back, because they're farming 2 super minion waves over and over again, which is a lot of golden experience. He is the primary carry, and he needs to be alive to carry. He needs to use all his teammates as sponges for him to give him vision as human wards and soaking damage, so he can just do whatever he wants to do. But if he has to play against Fog or War, the enemy team has all the chances in the world because of the champions they have to just get him killed. All that needs to happen is there's a ward, the Lulu polymorphs him, and then somebody all-ins onto him. There's nothing he can do about this one. So there needs to be always, preferably somebody in front of him that allows him to play the way he wanted to play earlier. Lux using an ultimate to clear the top wave to make sure things are not that troublesome, because this wave is probably a multi-stacked cannon wave which will take down towers. And this is all like basically a snowball effect of everything that happened earlier because he died. This is the impact of just one death. Doing Nashor against an EZREAL or just any kind of poke champion such as Ziggs or anything along those lines is a very scary thing, because if you get tagged by those spells, you'll take so much damage. This EZREAL is super fed. Like, any hit he does onto you will chip away so much of your HP bar. And for some, like, look, the Zed is just absolutely confused, and he's just spacing away, keeping his distance from the enemy champions because it's too risky. He also has Nashor buff now, so he needs to maintain it. Maintaining the Nashor buff is more important than anything else, because if he dies, he'll lose the game. With the Nashor buff, he'll be completely fine and nothing will happen to him or his team, because the minions are too powerful. He can just poke them out and the enemy cannot possibly finish. The enemy obviously doesn't know about this, and the Yone goes for a very desperate play of flashing in his third Q and trying to get Chronix killed. But obviously this should never work, and given how you played earlier, this is not a possibility. Now Chronix doesn't know if the Caitlyn still has exhaust, so if he goes in for the kill here, he might die for it, and he doesn't want to risk it. So now he just saw the trap of Caitlyn, so he knows she's top left, and with her being top left, he can run her down, because there will be plenty of space and nobody that threatens him along those lines. He knows exactly where she could have been, and, well, rather where she is not at the moment. As a consequence, he can play into Fog of War, because Fog of War isn't dangerous, because, well, he knows what's potentially in there and where it is. Now, the question is, will we see a repetition of what he has done before, like face-checking Fog of War when there will be enemies that are dangerous, or will he play it slow with his teammates as a puffer or sponge to get the enemies killed? When you look at this game, you see that the mid inhibitor is down and the bot inhibitor is down. So he goes back for an item spike, completely normal, changes to the stasis enchant just to make sure he doesn't die, and then goes for the Nashor. The reason is, the enemy has to deal with minion waves, and if they don't deal with minion waves, they'll lose to minions. So they have to face check you at Baron. So what you can also do is you can trap in the enemy jungle rather than around the Nashor, because the enemy team has to face check you. If you have cleared the vision, you can then just sit there and kill the people. I'm sorry, I meant Elder. And if you get Elder, they just have no chance of winning. But this also applies for Nashor, it applies for any objective. But for some reason, his team is completely all-inning when they can just not. Like, this was completely unnecessary when they can just play it slow. But it's not a problem, because Chronix still has enough time to help his team win the game, because all he has to do is cancel their back continuously and then hoping to get a kill as well. If he can deny them, it will be good enough. He made a lot of time, unfortunately misplayed, but it still won't end him the game. Nashor isn't available yet, so the enemy can't end. They haven't prepared waves, and his allies will respawn early enough to clear the waves. Also, since they don't have a Nashor, Lux can just completely blast a wave anyway. But just generally for your understanding, please take care of side waves more often. You don't want to lose the game to just minion waves. If you take a look at the enemy tower in their top lane, or rather their bot lane depending on how you want to view it, it's nearly dead, and no player did touch it at all for a long time. With all of this in mind again, it's just a very big question if Chronix's team can contain themselves and not run it down constantly, because they really don't have to. All they have to do is wait until he is around and play with him. They just need to be a sponge for him to play the game, but if they overreach too far into the enemy team, he cannot follow without getting himself killed. And now they're constantly fighting into the Elder Dragon buff and risk dying for no reason. The enemy wasn't even attacking the objective yet, and yet they still tried to attack the enemy. Jax is dying for fun, Caitlyn is luckily missing traps, so everything is still okay. And it just gets unbelievably troublesome for no reason. Caitlyn is chasing the Nunu away, then the Lulu is unbelievably trolling by just her movement on the map, and Gragas tries to kill him. Like, all of those plays serve no purpose. They just make it so much more difficult for the enemy team to do anything, because they are just trolling. They're destroying their chances at Nashor or anything along those lines, because they're isolating themselves over and over and over again. And with the waves in place like this, or being taken care of like this, the enemy has to make constant choices around this, because those minions will pose a big threat, and with Elder dissipating now, the odds of winning a fight could become so much more low, or so much lower, because Elder in this game is such a powerful tool, and once Chronix has access to his flash again, things become really troublesome for the enemy team in order to catch him. They need to lock him down, and without Yone there, they will never lock him down. So Luna needs to polymorph him, or Yone needs to hit him, otherwise nothing is gonna happen. And once they establish positional control, the enemy has to run into them, and running into an Ezreal in the Lux is usually certain death. Whatever they do, they get close and they get completely blown apart. Because you see this damage, it's just crazy. And the enemy Zed is constantly not identifying what he has to do. He needs to ult the Ezreal. And with them getting the Nashor buff, things become so much easier for Chronix. Without the Nashor buff, he would not possibly have survived this. Honestly, also this ultimate was a misplay, because it takes too long to be cast, and he would have died to it if the enemy played it probably differently, but it was a damage loss. Nonetheless, if the enemy got the Nashor buff, they would have lost, because simply for the resistances and the AD and like what Nashor grants you. Because we are 24 minutes into the game. This buff is absurdly strong. Now, the enemy just has nothing left to do, and they're just winning. But if you look at this game, all you can see is that Chronix's team tried everything to lose him the game over and over and over again, while the enemy team was also trying to lose their own game constantly. So what does this tell you? You can be the difference. You need to play better, and you can play better. There are plenty of situations in which Chronix could have played better, and he played well. Don't get me wrong, he played amazingly well. But still, he could have played it better in a lot of situations which could have ended the game way earlier. Don't give your teammates the chance of ruining your game. Make sure you play clean and make sure to minimize your mistakes. That will be good enough for you to climb. And that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.